Welcome to the Kings Beat podcast. I am James Ham. Joining me today, we have Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast. Brenden, how are you while we wait for Sean?
I'm doing well. Sean is out picking a proper candle for the occasion and just a little bit behind, but I'm doing well, making sense of this trade that just happened not long before we kicked this off.
Yeah. There's a big trade that we'll get to. We are waiting for Sean to pop on. And he'll be here any minute. He's at work and he's trying to transition to jumping on the show and hanging out with us. But it's trade season. It's draft season. It's crazy time. All kinds of things are happening. We'll just start with the basics. If you are here watching on YouTube, we appreciate all of you joining us. And if you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. And if you want to comment, you got to be a subscriber. So subscribe here to the channel on YouTube, and that's way to so you can actually comment in the live chat. Also, jump on board with the Kings Beat. We keep growing and we're having a great time producing all kinds of draft content and free agent content and everything else that's going on right now. It's gonna be like, by all accounts, it's gonna be a wild 2 weeks. And I don't know how it's all gonna pan out in the end, and we don't know what's gonna go on with the Kings. But make sure you're following us here at the Kings Beat. Become a premium subscriber to the Kings Beat so you get access to everything, including the happy hours. And so that's the business side. Brenden, you and I both have been diving really deep into draft coverage, examining all these prospects, watching tape on everybody. Um, let's start there. Where are you at with your draft process when you're looking at the pick number 24? Of course, Kings have pick 24. They've got pick 38. They've got pick 54. And everything kicks off on Thursday at 5 o'clock with the NBA draft starting. But where are you at with just what the Kings have right now that's sitting in front of them, and how wild do you think this first round is going to be?
I mean, I think that it's pretty wide open after someplace in late teens or early 20s. I think that there's a point there that you reach a different tier that's pretty wide. And there's a chance that, there's guys that maybe some people end up liking the idea of them at 24. They go a different direction, and then you're up at 38 and realize some of those guys are still available. I think that it's really hard to figure out what's going to go on towards the back end of this draft, but there is a lot of wing and forward talent, and that's a lot of what Sacramento needs. There's a lot of promising defensive guys that have the question of, okay, but if they can shoot, or they have to be able to shoot, or what is their shooting going to look like? But there's a lot of guys with defensive upside. You can sort of take your bet there, or you can look at some of the offensive upside that's here. They have a lot of different ways to go about this. And I think that both 24 and 38, you have an opportunity to potentially go for an upside swing, or a guy that you maybe think can fill a hole that you have on your roster right now.
Yeah, when I'm going through the draft prospects all around 24, realistically, when you're at this point in the draft, there's two different types of players. There are your seasoned veteran players, and then there are just shots in the dark. And the Kings have erred on the side of caution the last three drafts under Monty McNair and Wes Wilcox, where they have looked at more mature players for the most part. The only young guy that they've drafted really is Jemias Ramsey out of their three drafts. Outside of that, everyone else has been at least a 2-year college player. There's been a couple of 3 and 4-year college players. They're guys with proven track records. So when I'm looking at the draft at this section, I almost start looking at it the way that the Kings would look at it. And that's not because I want to ignore some of the talent that's there, but it's because I'm looking at the way that they've drafted, sort of their modus operandi, and I'm going basing some of my assumptions on who they might go for off of that. And I think it's probably it's not a bad way to analyze this group, but I think there are some players here with some tremendous upside. And I think that's where you get into like an interesting debate. Do you think that they'll handle 38 and 24 the same? Or do you think that, they could go like a tremendous upside guy with one of those picks and then try to hit a solid base hit with the other?
I mean, that's what I would prefer. I think I do just enjoy having an upside swing, though. I think there's a just sense of excitement surrounding that personally I enjoy a little bit. So I think that it could go either direction. They could take two upside swings. They could take two safe guys. Like there's really, I know that's not really answering your question, but I think my point is there is a lot of options here, and it's really hard to tell who is and is not going to be available. Like, Sean and I believe yourself, James, as well, have talked about like Leonard Miller being a guy that we really like, but probably won't be there. He's been sliding down boards. Like if he's there at 24, I would be really hard to not take Leonard Miller.
Yeah.
And you just don't know who is going to possibly be there.
Yeah, I think we talked about Leonard Miller is one of those guys, right? So it's always interesting. You get to this point in the draft, and we're starting to see like climbers. There's all these people. Oh my gosh, he's moving up draft boards. He's moving up draft boards. We heard the reports today, even from Sam Bessany, that Jaime Jaquez is just like he's impressed everybody so much with his tenacity, and he's jumping up draft boards and like so. But the thing is that every time someone jumps up a draft board, that means that someone else falls down. And so we get to this point where here we are the day before the draft, and Leonard Miller, who, I mean, for my money, I don't understand what's going on here. We're talking about 6'10", we're talking about like 7'2" wingspan, right? Like all kinds of offensive game. He goes out in his last like 15 G League games and just dominates the league, like 20 and 10 dominates as like a 18 or 19-year-old kid. Like everything tells you that he's got the talent. And then he started to produce, and he didn't get an invite to the green room. And so like usually like the top 20 to 25 players get invited to the green room. I was of the opinion he was going to go in the top 15. I watched enough tape of him that I'm sitting here going, how is he not going in the top 10, maybe even the top 7 of this year's draft? But it's very possible that he's going to fall. And he's the guy where I take every other game plan that I have and I kind of throw it out the window and go, okay, I've got to take the gamble here because he might not be ready to compete this year, but he might be like a Pascal Siakam type talent. And you shouldn't pass up on guys with that much talent, that much size, that much mobility, that much ability to handle the ball, everything else. You're seeing the tools that are there of what could be like a star level player. And I think the trick at 24 is you really need to find as much talent as possible. At 38, you can really try to look for a fit and a need, right? But at 24, you got to look for talent still.
Yeah, and you're of the like, if that talent is a center or a point guard, does that matter to you at
No,
24? Like you've said before, you would take Trace Jackson Davis 24, right?
I would take Trace Jackson Davis
And
24.
I love Trace Jackson Davis. I just don't know that spending 24 on a guy that there's like just no way he plays more than 15 minutes that Domas isn't playing.
Okay,
Is it?
but if we go back to like the last 10 drafts and we look at the 24th pick, are like 4 of them rotational players?
Yeah.
So if
Right.
you can get a guy, whether he's playing 15 minutes or he's playing 25 minutes, like you got to try to find somebody at this pick if you're going to use it. Now, I still think that like everything else is on the board. Like I think that the Kings could easily trade this pick tomorrow. Like we could see them draft for somebody else. They can't. Just to clarify, they can't trade the pick before the draft. But what they can do is they can pretty much come to like the final results of a trade, and then select a player for another team and have him be relayed once a new NBA season starts on July 1st. Well, I think they have to wait until the moratorium's up, which is like July 6th before they can actually finish the deal. But I still think that all options are on the board here. And if I'm the Kings, I want to get as much talent as possible. Hey, look, we've got Sean, and we'll see if Sean is
Oh.
up and running. So give me 1 second. We're gonna switch things up here. We have to adjust everybody. Hello, everybody. Hello,
And
Sean.
welcome. Holy
No,
crap.
that wasn't good.
Oh my gosh.
Sean, you got the crinklies. I don't know what it
Sorry
is.
to everybody's eardrums.
Let's
My
try it
God.
again. Let's try it again, Sean. He gives us the 1 minute sign.
Oh man, I feel for the people that were playing this in their car.
Sean, we got you. Okay. So Brendan and I will keep talking while Sean is figuring out what's happening.
The live from the Titanic comment got me.
Oh no, I missed that. Yeah, so I think we're in this weird position where there is so much talent in this draft, but also like so many different paths you can take. So, Brennan, to answer your question, I don't care if there's a point guard. The Kings have a need at point guard. Like Matthew Dellavedova is gone, and you don't know what's going to happen over the next couple of years. So drafting a guy at 24 with the hopes that maybe he can develop into something, why not? But like you've looked at the draft board, I've looked at the draft board. There just aren't that many point guards in this draft, and there's not a lot of centers in this draft. Realistically, what it is a whole bunch of twos, threes, and fours, and a lot of 2 3s, and a lot of 3 4s, and a lot of 4 3s. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah, which is probably a welcome sight for the Kings.
Yeah.
I do like your perspective of 24. Like if you do get somebody that plays 15 minutes tonight, that's a success really at 24. And I love Trace Jackson Davis. I've watched a lot more of these last couple of days. I love Trace Jackson Davis. I still would be hesitant at 24. I think there's other guys I'd probably prefer, but who knows how it shakes out.
Yeah, I was looking. Hey, Sean, have we come up with anything yet or no? Not yet. Yeah, the player comp that I read, I think it was Kevin O'Connor. Because when I'm going through and I'm doing my player comps, I like to look at some of the other player comps that I see just to see if I'm like way off base with some of these things. And he said John Collins, and I'm like, oh, I didn't see John Collins. And then I went back and I watched him, and the way he moves, he looks like John Collins. Like he's a like long neck, kind of rigid upper body, the way that John Collins moves. And I started to see what he was talking about, but the game is a lot different, especially the fact that
zero jump shot.
Well, 0 3-point shot. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, he's taken 3 threes in his entire college career, and he missed all 3. We've got Chris Tavares going back behind us. I hope he's not going to like loosen his belt again. Sean, are you? Oh no, you sound like you've got like a nasal drip. Yeah. No. Now you sound like an Oompa Loompa. Oh, what's going on now? I enjoy the live show because we have the moments like this.
Exactly.
And Chris Tavares in the background acting like he's too cool for school. He probably can't hear us. But yeah.
How about now? You guys okay now?
There you are. Yes.
I'm just going to use the AirPods because this piece of shit doesn't work, but that's okay. Chris is here. How about that? I'm not Brenden Nunes.
Yeah, let's go
Say hi, Chris.
here. Let's go here.
There we are.
Welcome in Sean Cunningham. Sean Cunningham from Fox 40. You don't get your regular intro.
Back from San Diego. That's okay. I don't deserve it today.
Beautiful San Diego.
Dude, what
excellent.
What a time.
What a time to be alive, Sean. How are you? Let's just get the formalities out of the way. How are you? You don't have a candle here, so things are a little different.
I think that's the problem. There's no candle. I'm not in my typical space. I'm at the office. We're still working on like decorating this office, I think. When I say working on, we haven't really begun. There's some random like papers, as you can see, kind of up here, and I'm sure they have notes on them that we don't need. But yeah, man, just Chris, myself, a couple of guys from other state. Well, one guy, Mason Morrow from our station, and our friend Adam. We were just out in San Diego decompressing. Sometimes you need the vacation from the vacation, and I think I still need that, but I am refreshed, ready to talk some draft. Sorry I'm late. We've had a busy day, as you can imagine.
Any Ron Burgundy run-ins, or
we didn't have any Ron Burgundy run-ins per se, but I drank just like Ron Burgundy. So I did some damage in the gas lamp, and Chris, myself, we definitely, there he is. Speak.
I did some damage the day of the Padres game.
Oh yeah,
I heard it was a good game.
Chris, we were at the Padres game, Padres Rays on Friday. Chris attended. And yeah, there was moments he doesn't remember, including taking a picture of some of us that he went, hey, well, who took that? He's like, when did that happen? He's like, Chris, you took that picture. So he was blacked out and passed out before 10 o'clock. So
yeah, Chris is very similar to the sportscaster dude on Anchorman, except for he's got much better hair.
Much better hair.
The whammo.
The David Koechner character, is that who you're talking about?
Is it Todd? Is he Todd Packer in The Office?
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So anyway,
so what's up, fellas?
Not a whole lot. We've just been talking about the way that this draft is playing out. Like, it's still so wide open, and we're talking about a guy like Leonard Miller doesn't get an invite to the green room, and he's a guy that, like, how could you pass on him at 24 if he's there? I mean, just like all the talent in the world, but the Kings historically have gone with more seasoned players. And then both Brenden and I, expressed our appreciation for Trayce Jackson-Davis once again, because we think he's going to be a really good ball player.
And maybe available in that second round-ish maybe area.
Maybe, but I wouldn't risk it. Like, not in this draft.
He's on the board at 24. You're yanking him.
Something like that. I would select him. Yes.
Select him. Let's do that. Way to clean that up.
Yeah, you got to clean that one up. Yeah, I mean, but if I had a choice between Leonard Miller and him, I'm taking Leonard Miller because the upside is beyond crazy, and then hope that a guy like Trayce Jackson-Davis makes it to the second round. But how far have you gotten into your draft bag here with the draft just a couple hours away?
Yeah, I mean, quite a bit, man. Like, I would say it's funny because a lot of the people we've kicked around here over the past few weeks, I don't like to call, like, you look at your guys, and I always say fans will fall in love with a player, and certainly you've seen that with Chris Murray just because of the Keegan connection and all that, and I think a lot of fans would want to see that happen. But I'd say the guy that has kind of had my eye for around the 24th pick, I still don't think he'll be there, is the aforementioned Leonard Miller. He's somebody who obviously I've been quite high on. That's obviously no secret, isn't a secret there, but you're right. No invite to the green room. That's interesting, but we'll. I think it's so funny. It's refreshing in a way that you don't have to prepare for a top 5, top 10 pick. Mm-hmm. I think it actually makes it a little bit more intriguing that way. And I say that only from a media standpoint because the possibilities are endless. The storylines are so plentiful. When you go into a player who, is a lottery pick, there's a lot of drama there for sure. But you kind of know what to expect for the most part. You're kind of talking over the same 3, 4, 5 guys, maybe, if you're lucky. And in this circumstance, there's just so many possibilities that are intriguing. There's possibilities that can help you now. There's possibilities that can help your future. There's possibilities that are kind of slept upon because of situation and circumstance. So it'll be interesting to see what this team does tomorrow. Certainly, you've got the Stepien rule in effect, but once you attach a name to your pick, you're free to move that guy. So I think it'll be. I'm expecting a lot of activity on the internet, but I don't know that I'm expecting a whole lot of activity that's going to blow anyone away. I think it's going to be something where they make the pick at 24 and probably see that player in summer league and and probably training camp as well.
Yeah, if I were to guess too, we'll just talk about this again. Like again, there's this new rule that you can have up to three two-way players this year. And I think it means that, like, for sure, if I'm the Kings, I'm drafting at 38. Unless you're not going to trade back like you have in previous drafts where you're going and getting 2 second-round picks to move out of 38. At least I wouldn't do that. Not in this draft. I think there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent that makes sense for the Kings, but also a lot of talent that makes sense for the Kings for like a year or two down the road. And so the 38th pick to me in this draft is a two-way player. There's a good chance he's a two-way player, not a roster player. And do you think that that's going to have an impact, whether it's 38, whether it's 54?
Boy, sure. I mean, I don't know. It's I could be an undrafted free agent. You know, there's I think
Yeah.
I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Like you've got 2 teams, I believe it is, in the second round who have to forfeit their pick, and so the you're that much tighter now. The draft pool becomes that much tighter to where I know we're only talking 2 players there, but typically there's a lot of activity in undrafted free agents, and maybe somebody who makes a big impact in the summer league and kind of makes some waves there. So and I think Sacramento, knowing that you likely have Keon Ellis returning at least for a portion of summer league, and then if you do have 24 and possibility of these 2 picks, you're going to have a lot of intrigue there. So certainly with the way the two-way works, having the additional roster spot in that regard creates a lot of intrigue surrounding the roster, but just other options as well. And I think, you know, it's not the end of the world. It's starting to turn into the NFL in that way where, you know, undrafted free agents it's almost better to go undrafted sometimes than really super late in the second round.
Yeah, I thought Keon was in that situation. Brenden, you were going to add something to that.
Yeah, no, I think mostly the same. I think the second rounders probably become a little bit more valuable and important with you having another two-way, just another spot to fill if you can identify that talent. And as we mentioned before, like your G League system just becomes that much more important. And you know, we just saw Sacramento make some changes there.
Yeah, I mean the changes there, so people are on top of this. Lindsay, oh boy,
Harding.
Yeah, Lindsay Hunter dropped into my brain, not Lindsay Harding. Has been named the new head coach for the Stockton Kings in the G League. I think that's a spectacular move. Lindsay's been on the staff for a long time through a couple of coaches. She's a good lady. She's got a really good connection with players. And then, of course, they promoted Angeli Ronadive to the general manager position of the G League, which I'm not exactly sure what that means for Paul Johnson, who was the executive of the year last year. He will be part of the Kings front office moving forward, but we don't have a title yet. Sean, have you heard a title yet?
No. Heard one kicked around the other day. I don't really feel comfortable mentioning it, but I would imagine, look, I mean, this team, we've seen multiple assistant GMs in the past, player personnel, maybe director of scouting. I mean, they have positions already filled, but it wouldn't be surprising to me to see an additional assistant GM role added to the team.
Yeah. Okay, so we've got Sean on board here. So if you're watching on the live stream and you don't mind, give us a thumbs up. If you want to make comments, you've got to subscribe to the channel to make comments. Welcome into the Kings Beat live show the night before the 2023 NBA draft. Let's get to a couple of well, we can break into this with not the rumor, but the crazy trade that just happened. As we were prepping for this show, the Porzingis to the Boston Celtics trade fell apart. And then all of a sudden it got spun into a new trade, which is even more intriguing when it comes to the Sacramento Kings. And that is Marcus Smart is going to leave the Boston Celtics and go to the Memphis Grizzlies. Tyus Jones is heading to Washington. A couple of first round picks are heading to the Boston Celtics. I don't know, some cap filler. Mike Muscala and Gallinari are heading to Washington. Just what are your first takes on this one? Because the earlier trade where Malcolm Brogdon was heading to was supposed to go to the Clippers, and then that gets nixed because there's some sort of injury with Brogdon, or some sort of injury worry with Brogdon. That one wouldn't have been as impactful as I think the fact that Marcus Smart is on his way to Memphis, and that could have major ramifications for the Kings here coming up, because that makes them at least more interesting in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, clearly the Celtics prioritized getting bigger. They were shopping around the guards like the Marcus Smart or Malcolm Brogdon and looking to get more size to play Jalen and Jason at the 2-3 rather than the 3-4 and have more big guys around. And Porzingis fits that. And I think turning Marcus Smart into Porzingis, the 25th pick and a future first, is really good value. I'm a big fan of Marcus Smart. I think he's going to be really good in Memphis. I think he fits their almost sort of like bully you style, extremely physical, hard-nosed defender. And I think that it's a interesting deal for both sides, but really makes sense. It's kind of a lot to get for Marcus, like I said, but I also feel like Memphis is getting him for a decent price. So I really like it for both of those sides. Wizards case, maybe not so much. But
Well, the Wizards,
it's hard to get much of anything for Porzingis at this point, but they've had multiple guys leave now and gotten no firsts outside of Beal.
Oh, that's crazy. Sean, what are your initial thoughts?
It's, they lose a guy like Dylan Brooks and gain a guy like Marcus Smart. That's tremendous. It's just absolutely tremendous. It comes at just, in my opinion, just an interesting time because it felt like for the better part of a few years, we were expecting Marcus Smart to wear a different jersey. And sometimes you were thinking, oh, maybe it'd be a Kings jersey. But here he is into the Western Conference on a team that, boy, he fits really, really well. And I think he helps them get through that 25 games without Ja Morant services. And it's just the absolutely right kind of pickup that they need. I actually think it's a fair trade. I actually think, knowing what Boston's getting and a guy like Porzingis, and obviously with the picks involved, I think there's a lot of teams maybe scratching their head thinking that, boy, if that was the asking price for Marcus Smart, maybe we could have got involved somehow. But it's not that simple because of the fact of the package and what overall is happening there. But I'm a Tyus Jones fan too as well. It's going to be weird seeing him with Washington, kind of see what shakes out with possibility of Chris Paul, though I don't really expect him to be bought out. I could see him obviously maybe get his destination ultimately being LA or something to that regard. But I kind of get the impression he might be staying there. I just don't see the value in Washington buying him out at this stage. Am I crazy there, James?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a lot of money, but he's also got a lot of power behind him. So if he wants out of there, he's going to push. And I would expect that that's going to be where we're going to head with that. There are conversations there. It's not like they want to hold on to him so they can win more games. I don't think that that's what they're trying to do in Washington. I'll say this, like,
can I say one thing there? I in a weird way, I feel like it'll be a John Wall scenario. Like, I feel not buying him out and letting his contract expire will be better and more of a better situation for Washington. But it's really a sad thing to say, knowing that you're talking about potentially seeing a wasted season of Chris Paul, who doesn't really have many left.
Yeah, and I'd say the interesting thing too about Chris Paul in that scenario. Sorry, the dogs are barking tonight. Is that yeah, I mean, I would hate to see him waste a year of his career, but if you're going to stretch provision him, you still have to spend up to, you have to be within 10% of the salary cap, right? So the salary cap just got bumped up to 136 million. That means that you got to spend within like 122 million bucks. And having Chris Paul's salary, if you waive him and you stretch him, you could break up his contract over a 2-year period or a 3-year period. But then all of a sudden you got an extra 20 million bucks in cap space. And like, what do you do with your cap space then? So they could just flat out waive him. They could also have him negotiate a buyout where he takes, substantially less just to walk out the door. But if we get back to the deal from Memphis, like, first of all, I think that Marcus Smart is a really, really good replacement for Dylan Brooks in two ways. Number one, very similar game, like very, very similar game, except for one is more of a 3 and one of them is more of a 2. But, we're talking about hard-nosed defender, physical, a bit of a trash talker. But I think that the difference is that Marcus Smart is really a glue guy, and he might be the type of glue guy that Ja Morant needs to hold him in check and to keep him in line and to help him become a better pro. I kind of look at that pairing a little bit like, maybe not totally, but it like the Allen Iverson and Eric Snow pairing from years ago, where they really, really complemented each other, where one guy took on the tough defensive assignment, didn't shoot the ball a lot, didn't score a lot, but he did all of the dirty work so the other guy could be highly successful. And I could see that working. But I think losing Tyus Jones is a big deal. Like, Tyus Jones is what's been the motor that makes them run when they have trouble, and when Ja Morant is out of action. And so I'm intrigued to see how they fill that void, because he's a really good basketball player. He doesn't make mistakes. He's one of the best game managing point guards in the league. I mean, his assist to turnover ratio is nuts. He's just really efficient as a scorer and everything else. And he's a great defensive player. So I do think that they will actually, it'll hurt them. But if you knew you weren't bringing Dylan Brooks back, you had to figure out a way to fill that void anyways, right?
Well, that, and I feel like they'll find another backup point guard that's serviceable in the meantime. But having Marcus Smart, to me, I think it's an upgrade. I really do. You get a veteran presence that team desperately needed. A guy who has been through his trials and tribulations as a pro. There's a lot of people that have thought he's controversial, has certainly had behavioral issues in moments. He's kind of a live wire in a short fuse. So to me, it just absolutely fits with what they do, but only better. And a guy who's really in the right stage of his career that can help lead that team. I think it'll be a great addition to somebody like Ja Morant, who really needs a solid pro by his side. But I'm with you to an extent. I love Tyus Jones. I do think he'll probably flourish there in Washington. I really do. I think it's a great scenario for him to be a kind of a top tier guy, or definitely a starter. And I don't know that he'll find much success in the win column in the next year or so, but good area for him to grow.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of both of these guys. Also, I think that I agree with Sean's point that, like, maybe in Washington, Tyus Jones can get the chance to expand his game a little bit, and then maybe Washington can flip him at the deadline and try to get some value there. For Marcus, I think he is a guy that will inspire the guys around him to also rise up and play at his intensity level and just constant level of energy. I think he's going to be great. He's one of those guys that I think is going to, at least for me, be pretty weird to see in a different uniform at first. But I'm sure I'll get used to it pretty quick. I think, this guy dyed his hair green and Celtics traded him.
So now you can go blue. He'll just go blue,
I guess.
like a light blue, maybe a powder blue or something like that. Is that possible?
Okay. I'm going to bring up the other interesting piece here for the Sacramento Kings. They have been linked to OG Anunoby nonstop. The Kings have. And we've also heard that Memphis has been in the market for a wing defender, and they were potentially in on a trade for OG. They had bid. We've heard that they are the team that offered 4 first-round picks for Mikal Bridges, and so, like, this is one of those things where, does it take a team off the market because they gave up some ammo, but they also gave up a couple of picks. And this is one of those teams where, like, maybe they are a little bit closer to complete. I mean, Marcus Smart can play the 1, the 2, the 3 for them. He probably will have to shift to being a starting 3 once Ja Morant is back with Desmond Bane there. They still have Luke Kennard, which is a nice player to have. So, and you can shift Smart to the backup point guard. Like, I guess they do have some versatility there, but is that a good thing that at least one of the potential suitors for a guy like OG Anunoby if the Toronto Raptors do decide to make a move. Just basically took themselves off the board with this move.
Like, did they fully? They lost their pick this year, and then it was Golden State's first next year that they traded. They still have a lot of firsts that they could put on the table.
I'm with you, Brendan. I'm absolutely with you. That's why I was nodding this way. I was like, I don't know that I agree that they took themselves out of it.
Okay. Do you think that there's still a place in the backcourt? There's still or at the wing for him?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also because of draft capital, it could be that's what they bring to the table. And maybe you need some other pieces and other teams to facilitate something. But if there was ever a team that could give up something quite big for Anunoby, especially considering what they're trying to kind of blow up that entire roster, he's kind of the guy that would fit nicely into a rebuild, given his age, given what he brings, and a nice piece to possibly build around.
With Anunoby?
Correct.
Okay, but who are they giving up?
I mean, you got the draft capital, and know that's what I mean. Where you need to possibly hit your wagon to some other teams to try and make this thing work. But that's what they at least bring to the table more so than anything. And I think Toronto looks at that as very, very attractive, especially given just the climate of what they might be. And I don't know that they're going to totally want to look to completely blow things up either from a Toronto standpoint. But obviously they didn't jump the gun at the deadline. In fact, they added to their team. So we'll see what the likes of the Raptors do. And I don't know. They're a fuzzy one to figure it out. I think you've got two guys that aren't all that long in the tooth for their team, and Siakam or Anunoby, at least on paper. Maybe you keep one, and maybe you just chalk everything up to you just maybe run it back in a way and try and find pieces to build around them. But certainly, if you're getting rid of one or both, you're looking at draft capital, and then hopefully they can dangle that out there, and especially if they keep one of those players, if not both, find a way to build around them.
Say like Luke Kennard, Zaire Williams, and 3 first-round picks. Like how does that compare to Rashawn Davion and 3 picks?
Yeah,
just higher picks likely, right?
I don't know if we can say they're higher. I mean, they're both teams. One was number 2 and one was number 3. So their picks should be around the same range. I think one of the biggest issues the Kings have is that, and we discussed this today on D-Lo and KC. If the Kings are going to make a deal, I expect them to make a deal sooner rather than later, because if you don't use your 2023, this pick right here to help you in a deal, then you really can't give anybody anything for another like 3 or 4 years. Right. So you can put a rider into a trade that says, if the Kings give up the 2024 pick to the Atlanta Hawks, then you get the 2026 pick. If not, and it's got to be a 27 or 28 pick. So you can build that in. But if you're not offering the 23, like how far out are you offering? Like draft capital for a team. And that's not a good position to be in. Because specifically with the Raptors, like if they lose Fred VanVleet, they're in trouble and they've got to figure out something. They also have the Gary Trent Jr. situation where he just opted into his $19 million deal. So they know they have him back. But then the other 2 pieces, you're really looking at how do they build around Scotty Barnes, right? And if you're going to build around Scotty Barnes, you want to have picks and players coming in that are going to be around his age, which means they would want a pick this year, like at a minimum. And then maybe, and then probably a couple more picks. But at a minimum, you at least want one player to start building around. And that's something that I think the Kings they'd have to do a deal that makes sense like tomorrow in order to do that. In order to allow Toronto to draft the player that they want at 24. So I think it's interesting. We had the
well, I'll just also say real quick that I think shooting is something that would be pretty good for Scotty Barnes to have more around. And I've saw people mention in the last comments that should Kevin Huerter be mentioned as part of this? Like, we're always talking about Rashawn as the matching salary, but if Kevin Huerter is your matching salary, it's probably a more intriguing deal. And maybe that's something that would catch Toronto's attention.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. But then you got to fill the void. You've got to backfill the
Right.
shooting guard position. But it actually is possible, and there are players out there that actually could make sense for you. If you're the Kings, if you do end up trading Kevin Huerter. I was going to bring up, there was a report today, and I went back and I listened to the podcast. So, why am I drawing a blank? It's
we're going here. We're going to go here.
Yeah. Who? Mark Haynes.
Haynes.
Chris Haynes, not Mark. Chris Haynes went on a podcast in Portland, and threw out the fact, that the Kings the Kings were are hot after OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam, and so now you got everybody in Kingsland going, "Oh my gosh, they're getting both." So just to clear up a couple of things. Number one, just don't aggregate this as if I said that the Kings were going to trade this package to get this player. But the Kings could conceivably package Richaun Holmes, Davion Mitchell, Kevin Huerter, and a grouping of picks and trade for both players. Like, financially, it actually works. It would eat up some of the Kings' cap space, but you could actually pull that trade off per NBA rules. But I went back and listened to what Chris said, and it was very clear that he just kind of flippantly said, and he didn't say or. And so I don't think there's a way that the Kings come away with Pascal Siakam and OG Anunoby from Toronto. First of all, they're both really good. Secondly, in order to do it, you're going to have to give up like 3 or 4 first-round picks and probably a couple of pick swaps as well.
Keegan Murray.
Maybe Keegan, but again, everything I've heard is the Kings will not include Keegan Murray in a trade as of right now. I'm just saying.
If you're getting both of those players, you're giving Keegan Murray a ride to the airport.
It's possible, but
that's why that's not going to happen. I mean,
here's why. Happening. But this is also why I don't think it's going to happen, and that is that both Siakam and OG Anunoby are at their end of their contracts. They're both entering the final year of their contracts. So you're not going to trade for 2 really, really good players who would slide in alongside your all-star center and your all-star point guard and make you a legitimate title contender. But you're not going to trade for those guys if you have no guarantee that they will be here next year. And we can throw in Malik Monk and we can throw in Domantas Sabonis in that situation. If you're the Sacramento Kings, you would never go into an offseason, or if you did, it would be the craziest thing ever, where De'Aaron Fox had the other 4 starters alongside him, or at least 4 of the top 5 best players alongside him, all free agents at the same time. That would be like rolling the dice in the biggest way possible, where you go from really exciting to, oh, Jesus, what just happened? Or the potential for that to happen. So does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah, I think the idea of trading for both of them is just pretty crazy, to be honest.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's let's put it this way. In pairing them together, have you had discussions about each one of them? Sure. A package that nets both of them, let's be realistic here.
That's rough. That's a lot. And I don't know how you get up to the dollar amount that would kind of make sense. Right?
And can I point out something too? Like, this is not just things that are recent. I mean, these are things over the past year that have happened. I mean, you've kicked the tires on players, and a comment like Pascal Siakam that could have been 6 months ago, could have been 10 months ago. And within recent discussions, sure, both teams know what each team is looking to or is willing to provide, especially in the case of Anunoby and Siakam, and given their contract status. Now, the closer you get to the 23-24 season, the lesser you're willing to give up because of their contract situation. So without having their future completely tied down and guaranteed for years to come, It doesn't matter if you're getting either one of them. I mean, the asking price, the amount you're willing to give up will decrease.
Okay, so I'm going to take care of some weird business when it comes to both of these players. So OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam both entering the final year of their career. You can do what's called an extend and trade in the NBA, where a player gets an extension and then gets traded, and basically there's a 48-hour window for the trade to happen, whatever. But you can actually negotiate an extension and then trade a player, and that's something that like the Kings would probably want to at least have cursory discussions. The problem is that any extend and trade, you can only do a 5% raise. Now, this is two different players. So like Pascal Siakam makes 37 million bucks. 5% raise is probably okay. Like he's a guy who already makes 37 million bucks. 5% raise puts him just under 40 as a starting salary. So there's a possibility that you could actually do like a 4-year, 40 something, 180, $175 million extension, right? OG Anunoby is in a different situation. He only makes 18.6 million bucks. He's going to most likely opt out of a $19.9 million contract for next year, but 5% raise is not what he's going to be looking for, that 18.6 million. So if you trade for a player, if you trade for either of them without doing an extension first, you cannot you cannot extend the player for 6 months. Once you trade for them, you get to the 6-month mark, you can discuss a trade for, again, with OG Anunoby, it's going to be up to 140% of his current salary. And that's 26 million bucks, basically. A starting salary at 26 goes up to 28, goes up to 31, goes up to 33, whatever. It's right around 30 million bucks a year for a 4-year contract extension. I could see that actually being something that makes sense for OG Anunoby. I don't know about Siakam. Again, Siakam's 29. He'll be 30 next offseason. You got to kind of, it's a little bit confusing on what his value would be, whether he's going to be a $180 million player going forward for 4 more years until he's 33, 34 years old or not. But I just want to make sure we discuss that part of it. Once you trade for those guys, if you don't already have an extension in place, you have to wait 6 months. And that puts you, if you do it July 1st or July, you have to wait until like July 6th. That puts you into January, where you could actually negotiate a contract extension if they have a want to stick around.
Yeah, and I think the possibility of those players making more money on the open market as unrestricted free agents is still greater, right?
Yeah, but I mean, how much greater is Siakam going to make than almost 40 million? And how much is it possible that OG Anunoby becomes a star in Sacramento and makes all defensive team and gets more than 26 million? It's possible. But it brings up, like, some people are chatting here while we're discussing this about Kuzma. Like Kyle Kuzma wants 30 million bucks a year. So like whether Kyle, I mean, this goes back to that whole thing. If you think you have a $2 million house, but you can't sell it for more than 500,000, you only have a $500,000 house. So I hope that Kyle Kuzma gets whatever it is that he wants, but like he can probably make $30 million a year from Washington to stay there and just be a lone dude, a lone gunman on a grassy knoll, and make a whole bunch of money, but not win any games from here on out. But in order for him to go somewhere else, there's just not that many teams with a bunch of cap space.
Well, let's answer Mark Robertson's question here, James, Brenden.
Yeah, go for it. Where's it at?
Siakam, if you're the Kings, would you prefer Siakam or Anunoby?
I know Sean's answer, but Brenden.
I mean, in a vacuum, Siakam's just better.
What do you mean in a vacuum?
Well, but like, are we talking considering what you're giving up? Like, to me, if you're getting Siakam, you might have to include Keegan. Like, I think that price included, I would probably pick OG, but I think that Pascal's the better player.
Sean?
I mean, yeah, Pascal Siakam, hands down.
I'm going to go the other way. I think the guy that would mean more to your team is OG Anunoby. Like I really like Siakam, and I actually think he'd be a pretty good fit next to Sabonis. And I also think that when Sabonis steps off the court, you can now run the ball through Siakam because he's all of a sudden developed this incredible ability to pass the ball, where he averaged 6 assists a game, close to 6 assists a game last season. So I think that that's great, but he's also 29, OG's almost 26. So you're 3 years younger. The contract is half. The quote unquote star treatment that you would get for getting Siakam is huge, but he's also going to cost you. And I don't know. I don't know that you have to give up Keegan Murray in that situation, because the fact is that OG Anunoby is going to be a free agent, and they're not, and you don't have a way to extend him really until at least January, and you have no idea if you're going to be able to keep him. And so you're not giving up last year's number 4 pick, who went out and had a really solid rookie season, when you have no promise of it being anything more than a rental. You would give up probably 2 picks to take that gamble, and you're going to have to give up plenty of. You're going to have to give up Davion. You might have to give up Davion, Rashawn, and Kevin Huerter to make the money work. And then that's another thing I want to bring up. We always throw these what would it take type scenarios, right? We have this conversation here on the podcast. The reason why we bring up Huerter, or we bring up Davion, or we bring up Rashawn Holmes is because the Kings only have 7 players under contract, and the other 4 players are Fox, Keegan, Sabonis, and Monk. And again, Monk's value is slightly hurt because he's only on a 1-year deal. But the other 3 are basically your building blocks, and you're not going to trade them in most scenarios. So that's why these guys get brought up. If Harrison Barnes was under contract, he would be part of that discussion, or Trey Lyles, or any of the other guys that were under contract last year. But the Kings only have these 7 dudes, and it's difficult to put salary structure together for a trade without including some of them. Right? Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I think I would go, let's just go around the table one more time. So Brenden, you say Siakam?
I guess I'm picking OG here.
Oh,
Okay. I'm picking
Well,
OG.
I just cost considered.
Well, you don't know that it's going to cost.
No, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't take that off the table. Just
then
who would you rather have?
Yeah, then it's Siakam for me.
Because I don't necessarily think you have to give up Keegan Murray, given what your draft capital is, to acquire either one of them. Certainly, if I'm Toronto, I would absolutely want Keegan Murray. So those are discussions that have to be had. But yeah, man, that's a tough decision. But if you're getting Siakam, yeah, I would. I think it's worth the risk. And if you're giving up Keegan Murray, then you're holding on to hopefully some picks and figuring it out. That's again, I always love attaching other teams to scenarios and things like that. Especially if you're getting off of a contract like something like Rashawn Holmes or something like that. Because again, we've talked about it. Everyone loves to attach Rashawn Holmes to everything. It's not that easy to move him. He's the modern day Kenny Thomas for this team in a way, and it's not wanted at the moment because of his contract. So the closer you get to his the end of his deal, the more attractive he becomes.
Yeah. Okay. So when we talk about this now, let's get into the next discussion. If you don't get OG, we're not going to bust into a full-fledged free agent conversation, because that would be for next week. We have no idea what the Kings are going to do on draft night, whether that changes anything, because it probably doesn't. The 24th pick in the draft, the Kings are the 3rd seed in the Western Conference this last year. If they hope to maintain and improve, that 24th pick probably doesn't see the court all that much in his rookie season. So again, that pick to me really doesn't have that much bearing. But what do you do if you're the Kings, if you can't get an OG Anunoby? Clearly there's going to be discussions with Harrison Barnes. The Kings have already had discussions with Harrison Barnes, and I was reading up on this too. So the new collective bargaining agreement, once NBA Finals ends, you can start negotiating with your own free agents, right, that are coming up, and that's going to be in the new CBA. And the current CBA, this is kind of like a sleight of hand that NBA teams do. You can't discuss free agency with your own free agents to be, but what you can discuss is potential contract extensions with players that are already under contract with you, that are still under contract
It's
with
been
you.
discussed. Let's just put it that way. It has
So
been
yes,
discussed, but not using the words free agency. It's almost like your availability on the open market.
yes, like yeah. So it's this weird thing that again you can discuss an
Or when we go
extension.
to market. When we go to market.
Yes, yes. So there are ways to have these conversations, and from what I know, the Kings have had conversations with Harrison Barnes. They know the number that his people are looking for. The number is higher than what I expected, higher than what I think most people expected in the building. There has been like kind of a cooling off period, whether that means that they're going to get back to the bargaining table and have more discussions. I think it really does depend on where you're at after the draft, whether you've made a big move already. And then as we approach free agency, you've got a major decision to make here because it's about how you use your cap space, right? And so as of right now, the Kings are not a cap space team. They're just your standard everyday like mid-level exception team. They can get up to I have them. They can get up to like 22.3 million bucks in salary cap space. But that means that they don't have a mid-level exception. They don't have a biannual exception. They don't have Harrison Barnes. They don't have Trey Lyles or Alex Len or Chimezi Metu or who's the other? Terrence Davis. So they can get up to 20 something million bucks. Then they can come back and revisit the conversation with Harrison and try to get him to take less money and leave some other salary cap space open, and then become what's called a room team, and then use the room exception after they do all the rest of their stuff. And that exception isn't as big as a mid-level, but it's at like 7.7 million bucks. And so I could see the Kings going two different ways here, whether, it's like bringing back Harrison Barnes quickly on a contract and then figuring out to do with your cap space. But where are you guys at with like how you think they're going to approach the Harrison Barnes situation, and like what would you gauge is is he going to be back? Like, do you have a percentage?
I don't have a percentage, but I will say that, not being able to pull the trigger with Toronto doesn't necessarily mean green light back to Harrison Barnes. I think there are other scenarios that exist on other teams, and Harrison Barnes also has a decision to make. It's not just, do the Kings bring him back? Like it's a matter of whether or not he wants to be back, and in relation to opportunities that exist on other teams. And I think again, there's a number that the Kings are willing to bring him back for. There are situations that the Kings are probably hopeful that go in a different way. But at the end of the day, if they've got Harrison Barnes at a manageable number back on their team, they're going to be more than happy with that.
Brennan? Oh, you're muted.
Wow, would you look at that? Unmuted. I think that you try and look in other directions. I think that there are more ideal complementary wings to be a pairing with Keegan Murray than Harrison Barnes, but he is clearly somebody that can get the job done. Like we saw him do it last year. And the worst thing that could happen is that he walks to another team in free agency and the Kings don't have a guy that, can comfortably fill that void. And so I think that it's a really tough decision. It'd be pretty hard for me to, it just depends what that number that we're sort of talking about is. You got to have your number that you're willing to walk away at. And I think it's hard to really pin that down if you have any concerns of like, okay, if he leaves, what if we're left with, Chris Murray as our other starter, or Sasha is starting all of a sudden?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the problem, that like I'm just keep repeating the Monty McNair, maintain and improve. Like maintaining for this team is bringing Harrison Barnes back. And I even think that there's a way to improve without changing everything, right? If you do add Sasha Vezenkov, you bring back Trey Lyles, you make like a moderate addition here or there. Outside of it, you have the 24th pick. But there's a natural progression that your team will get from A, playing together longer, and B, having players step up and become more than they were before. And the Kings still have, not only Keegan Murray, but Davion Mitchell, who's still young, even De'Aaron Fox and Kevin Herter and Malik Monk are young enough where they can take another step in their careers and be better. And so you can improve just by staying organically together and trying to move forward. But at the same time, like I think we all saw it all last season, there are some limitations, and there's some limitations, and it's not really like a Harrison Barnes issue as much as there is. If you have Harrison Barnes and Domantas Sabonis and Keegan Murray, none of which are extreme athletes with extreme length, then the three of them together might not be the best pairing long term. Like if you are able to change other pieces out, then maybe it would make more sense. But for right now, that's where your limitations. It's not so much a Harrison Barnes limitation, it's a Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, and Domantas Sabonis limitation. And if you bring in Sasha Vezenkov, I'll add that. It's the same exact limitation the other guys have. They're good ball players. They're smart ball players. They can pass. They can do all the things you need them to do, shoot. They just aren't long, athletic, and shot blocking and defensive minded players. So you're going to have an issue. I could see the Kings. I think there's a number that Harrison Barnes people want, and then there's a number that Harrison Barnes would play for to come back. And I don't think those are the same numbers. And there's also a number that the Kings want to pay him. And so somewhere in the middle, there's going to be a common ground. And so I wouldn't be shocked if Harrison Barnes was back, but I'd also look at the possibility of something completely different. And that is Harrison Barnes being brought back at a dollar that's low enough where you still have enough money to go back to Domantas Sabonis and potentially discuss and extend a raise and extension this summer. And so we mentioned this before on the podcast. I still think that that's in play. And those are some murmurs that I'm hearing that there's potential for an extension for Sabonis this summer. And the only real way to do that is pretty complicated. But it's to be a true cap space room team that can, go out there and carve out $5 to $7 million worth of extra salary cap space this year, add it to his $22 million salary, and then give him an extension based on that raise that you gave him. So, for instance, if you give Sabonis a $5 million bump to $27 million, an extension for him would start for next season at $37.8 million, $40 million, well, almost 41, 44, and $47.6 million. So a total package of $170 million over 4 years plus next season's salary. So 5 years. If you're able to clear up $8 million in space and go up to a $30 million salary for this season, and then your 140% raises, you're looking at $189 million contract extension for 4 years that would kick in after next season. And those are numbers like, again, if you tack on the 27 million to the 170 million, you're looking at like $197 million 5-year deal. That's not bad money for Sabonis. If you look at the 30 million, that's $220 million for Sabonis. Are those things that make sense to you guys? Or would you guys think that Sabonis might be able to get more, or he's going to hold out for more and wait until next summer?
In my mind, Domantas Sabonis waits till next summer. And that's to go with the amount of money that he can get, and especially coming off an All-NBA season this year. And I think the Players Union would probably encourage him to do that as well for the amount of money that he can go out and get a year later.
I think that he should get every dollar that he can, and that's probably open market. Remind me, he has to make All-NBA again to be eligible for Supermax. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's not a sure thing. Bam Adebayo just played amazing and is going to be in that conversation. Anthony Davis, if he was healthy all year, probably would have taken it over Domas. So that's something to monitor there for sure.
And to make note of the 65 games minimum requirement in the coming season for
Right.
some of these awards. That's also something to factor in as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean that. So you're
But I
not
mean, I
going
would
to
say
take.
that I would say this though, whether or not you shoot for the stars and get the money you want, you're still going to get the money that you were offered. Does that make sense? Like you will still get the ballpark figure that you'd be offered in the extension.
Yeah, no, I think he would too. But I think there's also something to walking into a season without something hanging over your team's head, without something hanging over your head, knowing that last season you got karate chopped on your hand and well, actually it wasn't even that. Just put his hand on someone's back and his hand popped. And he very well could have missed half the season and we weren't talking about this type of extension for him. Like injuries are part of the game. He didn't get injured at all. I mean, he did get injured, but played through it. Like there's always potential. And I mean, we're talking about like 220 million bucks or 200 or 200 million dollars. That's a lot of money. And while I think he can get more, you don't know how much more. And in order to get more, you're going to have either the Kings are going to want to pay you that, or there's going to have to be another team that somehow magically has, $50 million in cap space to go out and sign you. And so I think it's an interesting debate, but I have heard that there's potential
Sure.
for an extension this summer, and the only way to do that is to be a true cap space team, have cap space, and hand it over to a guy like that.
Yeah, yeah, and I would say on his end, I think this is something he's looking forward to. I don't think it'll be a distraction. I don't think it would be something that would hang over the team, like you mentioned. This is something I think he's looking forward to. He gets to control his own destiny as a player who's been traded twice and hasn't had that opportunity really in his career. So that is something aside from the money he signed while in Indiana, but to be wined and dined and to be able to go out and do. To make his own decision, knowing that Sacramento is a tremendous fit for him. Look, unrestricted free agency is very, very attractive to all players, especially if you're a guy like Domantas Sabonis.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's also possible he's settled in. Like we talked about it early on, but he said like he thinks he found his NBA home. He was the one that initially said that in his first press conference. And I think that does mean something. And especially it means something when, you got a little baby and you got another baby on the way and there's a big family atmosphere here in Sacramento. You might not get that everywhere else. And you have a fan base and a franchise that cherishes you and that wants you there. And I'm not saying that he didn't have that in Toronto or OKC, but I mean, not Toronto, Indiana or OKC, but he didn't have it like this. And so I think it's going to be interesting. Like, I think it'll be tested. We'll see what happens there, but I'm not going to say no, that he won't sign on the dotted line. I think there's potential for it this summer. Would you guys do it this summer if you can get it done?
Oh, if you're the Kings,
For
you're
sure.
absolutely, yeah. You're throwing everything you can at him to try to extend. I think the player will maybe hold on. I think that's what I would bet on. I would be quite surprised if he agreed to extend, but make no mistake, if you're the Kings, you're trying to extend him right away this season, get it out of the way, and set yourself up for the future as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it kind of changes everything, right, Brendan? Like if you had him under contract going forward and you've got Fox and you've got Keegan and like you now have your base, you know exactly what's happening moving forward.
Yeah, and I already feel pretty optimistic from Sacramento's standpoint. I feel like they have a good pitch. Obviously, they're somebody that expressed a lot of faith and interest in him as a player in person and trading what they did for him. They've put a good roster around him, a coaching staff and front office that's all on the same page, in line with each other and seemingly ownership as well. Good players around him. They're winning. I think they have a good pitch. I'm not too worried, but he's going to be the best free agent on the market that year. I think that he's one of the only all-stars that's available at that point. So teams are going to try, but I think Sacramento has a great pitch. If you can do the extension, you absolutely do it. But I think even unrestricted free agency, I feel pretty good about Sacramento's chances, but you never know.
I don't want people to hear that and go, he's going to test the open market. I mean, you test the open market, that doesn't mean you can't make your way back to Sacramento anyway. So it's not like a nail in their coffin and it's a done deal and you wipe your hands. Like, you already know what Sacramento is. You love it there. But can somebody present you with an opportunity that could be better than what you have here? And like you mentioned, James, he says this is his NBA home. This is everything he wants at the moment. That's as of this past season. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
That's as the moment he stepped foot in Sacramento and got his house in Napa. His wife's from LA. I mean, everything is paved that way, but a lot can change in a year. Not to say that it's bad. Things can all remain the same, but something in LA perhaps could be a lot more attractive at that point. I'm not saying I know that. I'm just using it as an example. So the landscape changes very, very quickly.
Worst example ever.
And that is why you go after him now. That is why you try to get it done 100%. Now. If you're the Kings, you try to carve it out. And that could mean getting really, really complicated with your salary cap. I also think, like, the way that to clear up everything, to make life super easy for the Kings, and where they can go out and chase free agents, they can bring back Harrison Barnes, they can talk extension and all that, is if somehow they can find a home for Richaun Holmes, if it's not part of some bigger deal. If they can just go out and trade him for with 3 second-round picks to get his contract off the books somehow with a team that has no interest in getting better. That it's something that would take them from, like, 32, 33 million, I mean, 22, 23 million bucks to like 33, 34 million bucks, like in the like snap of a finger. So, all right. So let's get to the business of basketball. Kings are on the clock. Who are you guys taking at 24?
Well, they're not on the clock.
Who are you taking at 24? What do you got?
We don't know who's available there.
I'm taking Derek Whitehead.
Ooh.
I'll play the game. I love the upside. It feels like AJ Griffin all over again. I'm actually curious to hear Sean's perspective as a Duke guy, but I think that it's one of those upside swings, but that there's a baseline of a really, really good 3-point shooter there. And I think that in itself can get him a role offensively. And if there's more athleticism to be unlocked there, that kind of was limited during his time at Duke because of some injuries, I think there's a really intriguing upside there and a halfway decent floor. But if he's there, which I'm not sure, he's a guy I really like at that spot.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that, if you remember years, I mean, this guy was very much heralded, great size and length and everything he's done. But I think the season at Duke, especially being a little bit younger of a player there, I think there's things you like, there's things that you can be critical of, but ultimately it kind of hurt him with a lot of guys making a lot of strides. And this was a guy who was at one point like a lottery pick. So I like his length. I like the potential there. Certainly, Brenden, you mentioned the 3-point shooting. I'm curious to see how he fits the NBA game. It would seem as if it would be very, very natural. He's very athletic. Defensively has some, I don't know. In the NBA, I think he might get a little eaten up. It's going to be a little bit of an adjustment, but I like some of the things he's shown defensively, especially in team concepts. But in the NBA, things can change very, very quickly. I like him. I don't know if I would take him at 24, though. I think he will be available potentially later on. I mean, you guys all know my thing on Leonard Miller. There's some people that have him high up. I think somebody even pointed out here in the chat here earlier today that NBA mock drafts, as much as they're terrible, NBA TV didn't even put Leonard Miller in the first round, which is kind of funny at the moment. So, I mean, I know there's been guys that have said Jaime Jaquez, he has the UCLA product. I got to see him obviously in the first round of the tournament here in Sacramento, up close and personal. Does a lot of nice things. He worked with Rico Hines, very, very familiar product with him. And he's also got the green room invite. So that's one of those, once you get somebody gets a green room invite, you kind of expect them to go maybe in the top 20, maybe close to that. So I don't know if I have a guy that I love outside of Leonard Miller, and he's, again, a guy that would be more of a project and not help you possibly right away. It's interesting to see what the Kings, how they've drafted. Certainly, as James likes to point out, all their draft picks, at least in the first round, have been guys that are help you right away scenarios, but they haven't had to really pick this low in the draft before. So this could be one of those. Take that flyer, take one of those players that is young enough to develop, give him some time with the G League, give him some time to really further develop and see what happens. But I'm also like you, James. Trace Jackson Davis is a guy that I do like a lot. He's a guy that I keep seeing slide down draft boards quite a bit and even into the second round, which is kind of makes me wonder if he'll even go into the second round. But if he falls into the second round, that would actually surprise me. I just can't see that happening.
Yeah, I can't see it happening either. I mean, I think he just really looks super impressive. I mean, just the like refined college game. I mean, he averaged 20 and 10 with 3 blocks and 4 assists per game. I mean, he was really, really impressive. So he doesn't shoot the 3 ball. That's going to be a problem. Whitehead, the problem with Whitehead that I think a lot of people have, and why he might actually make it to the Kings at 38, is because he's had 2 foot surgeries. So he had a foot surgery that really limited him early in the season, and then he had another foot surgery in the last like month. And so that's going to be like a red flag. But at 38, if he was available, heck yeah. I mean, he's absolutely tremendous.
Swoop him up at that point.
Yeah. And so my perfect draft would be if somehow, again, Leonard Miller falls to 24, I'm jumping all over him. I don't care. Like, and I've done my own research on him as far as like touch and base. He's a good kid. Like, there's no major red flags. He's a a kid that like does his work and shows up and really, really showed improvement. And then I would probably see if I could package 54 with 38 and move up to like 31, 32 to get Trace Jackson Davis. That would be sort of my perfect, where you get a young flyer and then you get a seasoned player who's going to come in and be able to handle himself, whether he's a like frontline NBA player or major rotational player, who knows, but at least he's got he's mature. He's got a skill set. So that'd be kind of my perfect night. Do you guys have any questions before we get out of here? Thanks for sticking around here on the Kings Beat podcast. We've been on for an hour and 17 minutes. But if you guys have questions, we can hit up. Let's take this. Let's see. Reddish and Thibault are both free agents from Portland, probably able to get them inexpensive. Do you think the Kings should go back and kick the tires? I'll just lump them together. There's Matisse Thybulle, there's Darius Baisley, all these names we heard at the trade deadline. Even like Josh Richardson, all of these guys are now free agents.
Mason Plumlee, right? Mason
Plumlee. Yeah. Are these guys that you try to go in?
Harrell.
Yeah. Montrez is a little tough because, I mean, you kind of have a very similar player in Rashawn Holmes. It just hasn't worked out.
Chris Middleton, who just opted out.
No, you're not getting Chris Middleton.
Shoot
plum
for the
dog.
stars.
But are those players even Reddish? I mean, Brennan, do you kick the tires on these guys again?
Reddish doesn't do it for me, but I think like the other guys mentioned that we've talked about before as potentially being intriguing fits are exactly the type of guys that I would try to have conversations with. You know, we went through the guys that Sacramento has expiring and talked about how for most of them, I'd like somebody that fits better. And I think is a complementary piece. And I think that a lot of those guys were mentioned because they do hypothetically fit better. So I would revisit those for sure.
Yeah. And so people know the Kings, like, even if they do the true cap space situation, right? Where they open up their cap space, they should have what's called the room exception, which is like $7.7 million. You can break the room exception up into multiple contracts. So some of these players like a Baisley or a Thibault, can you get one of them for $4 million and one of them for $3.5 million? Maybe. And honestly, I think you probably could get both. Could you get Cam Reddish for $3 million?
So Thibault's restricted, right?
Thibault's restricted, but I mean, they didn't give up much to get him. and they have plans to do much bigger things. I just don't know that he's a high priority for them, although he looked pretty good with them last season. But when they were trying not to win and doing all that stuff. So yeah, I would think that the Kings are probably going to kick the tires on any one of those guys. They could also use the entire $7.7 million on a guy like Mason Plumlee, like Jim Thurkill says here, although you said Pumblee. Would you guys revisit the Plumlee discussion?
I would certainly take a look at him. Yeah, absolutely. Especially unrestricted free agent. See what the market holds. He's a guy that, as Jim mentions, a good backup for Domas, or is he called Perfect? Yeah, that's a solid backup. This is the time to get him. I wasn't in favor of trying to dump off second round picks to go get a rental player that I didn't think would matter much in the grand scheme of things. Certainly, you could have seen how he could have been utilized very well in that Golden State series, but I would definitely take a look at him as an unrestricted free agent.
Brenden?
Same here. You need a backup 5. You got to figure out that spot. Obviously, was a position that they tried a lot of different things at last year and didn't end up really settling on a comfortable regular solution. So I think Plumlee's exactly that guy. Play that same sort of offense, be a decent rebounder. I like it for sure.
I also, just to fix, you mentioned Cam Reddish. I believe you said you weren't a fan, Brendan. I am inclined to believe to agree with you there. I'm not the biggest Cam Reddish fan.
Yeah, I'm not a huge Cam Reddish fan either. That's Kenny Caraway's guy. If the Warriors, if he gets traded, you think would he fit? Would you give up number 24 for Jonathan Kuminga?
Easily.
Oh yeah, you can have him.
Tell me who I don't think that would get it done, but
tell me who you want me to pick. I'll do it. You can have him, and I'll give you several seconds as well. And I'll take Jonathan Kuminga.
You think so?
Absolutely. I'll even give you I'd even give you like a Rashawn. I mean, whatever you needed to make it happen. I mean, within reason. But if you're looking for another role player or something like that you can give up that might be available, sure.
Thoughts on Yuta Watanabe?
Watanabe?
I love Yuta.
What's that?
I'm a big fan. I mean, a guy that you're definitely talking about in like a limited role, like TD sort of minutes, maybe something beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
But a guy that can really shoot the 3, a great effort guy. He had a great game against Sacramento. I don't remember if it was this year or last, but when he was with Toronto, he totally kicked their ass and Golden won one game. But no, he's somebody that I definitely like, is just one of those filling in the roster. And my biggest takeaway from the Denver series was, God, these guys are huge, and I think Sacramento could, benefit from getting a little bit more size in some of these complementary guys, and Yuta fits that.
Lots of questions about Andrew Wiggins in the chat today.
Yeah, I saw that too. Is Andrew Wiggins on the block? I don't know.
I mean, I can't imagine they're going to have they're trending towards a $500 million payroll. It could be.
Yeah, I guess at some point. I don't know. The Wiggins thing to me. Is he a huge upgrade over Harrison Barnes? I mean, I think he's an upgrade. He's younger.
That's an upgrade. That's
but I don't know. Like, there are too many times where he's timid. He's a 5th option. Yeah. I don't know. What would it take to get him? I don't know what to take to get Wiggins. Do you guys have a favorite guy that you just wish the Kings, like, again, like everyone mentions him here, is Nas Reed? But I mean, do you guys have just a favorite guy that's out there?
Yeah, I mean, my 3 are unrealistic, I think, at the moment. Do the Clippers dangle Paul George? I think that would be up there. Who knows how you make that happen? Certainly a Jaylen Brown is very intriguing, but I don't think that's happening now. If at all, I didn't think that was going to happen even back then. But yeah, Pascal, Siakam, all 3 of those guys are A+ on the Sean Cunningham list.
Sean just goes full-fledged with like really great players.
Yep.
He's out here playing 2K. Brennan, what do you got?
I like OG. And then I like Dorian Finney-Smith too. He's still got a couple of years left. I think he's a really, really good defender and a guy that can finished plays on offense, as long as that 3 ball's falling, that I think he's a really solid fit. Like I think 24 is for sure on the table for Dorian Finney-Smith in my mind.
Okay. I like Bruce Brown. Like if you're gonna go out there and like make a really, I like Naz Reid. I think you could do some like
Bruce Brown is going nowhere.
Yeah,
Remember
but have
what
you
Michael Malone told you?
Yeah, but have you seen the contract situation?
Yeah, they're keeping him.
It's complex. So like he opted out of like a 6 think 6.8, and the most it can sign him to is a $7.6 million contract. That's it. They can't sign him to anything higher than that. Because they have no other rights to him and they have no cap space. So I would be surprised if he doesn't take twice that money as a mid-level exception from somebody. So I think you can get him. And I also think that's why they just traded up into the first round and the late first and early second round, because they know that they're probably going to lose him, and they're probably looking at players that we've already discussed or players that we've written about that will be sitting there around those positions that can step in and play Bruce Brown type minutes.
Kyle Kuzma is also the one that's getting absolutely loved in the chat.
What would you pay for Kyle Kuzma?
It would take you your 30, all the money you can create from moving homes pretty much. And I would do it. I'd pay Kuzma $30 million a year.
Yeah, it's not my money. I mean, and everything's going up. You're gonna have to start learning about aprons and all that kind of stuff. So James, buckle up. We're gonna need you to explain aprons to everybody eventually. I don't know if I've got the patience of it for tonight, but
yeah.
Yeah.
I've already got the first apron, second apron, like the basics of it. Okay. But it's complex, and we're not getting into that at almost midnight.
No.
Yeah, Kyle Kuzma for $30 million. I say no. Now, Kyle Kuzma maybe at 25. Like, I would probably think long and hard about that. But I have a feeling, and this has been backed up by people that I've talked to, that Kuzma just likes the bright lights, and like he really does like to be in the spotlight. And I don't think he'd consider Sacramento. So, I mean, it is what it is. All right. Let's do final thoughts. What do you gentlemen got? Brendan, final thoughts.
It's insane to me that Washington traded Beal and Porzingis and got Landry Shamet, Tyus Jones, and second round picks.
The Chris Paul.
Shame. Chris Paul, you're right. And they needed to reset. I think it's the right decision for them. I'm just shocked at what the return has been.
Can I just remind people, though, like I know people see that and they go, what the hell? How did that happen? You have to remember that Bradley Beal had a no trade clause. So of the scenarios, he controlled where he got to go. And that's how it got to happen was and I think Washington was okay with that. You got new ownership in there, You have new management in there, people running the front office. Reward Bradley for the, years of service. I mean, he's been a guy that's put a lot. It's kind of like the modern day Mitch Richmond, if you will, who was put up all-star numbers, was an all-star, hasn't translated into success either. So moving on from him was absolutely the right thing that had to be done. And in my mind, you get what you can, and that's really the tough part about having a player with a no trade clause is, and that's where he wanted to go. So,
I mean, they at least had conversations. Kings did. That's intriguing. I
mean, he gave him a collection of names, and look, the Wizards could have said we're not going to trade you and run it back, but they all knew that they didn't want him back there with the money he's going to make later on down the road. So. This is just, it is what it is. And yeah, it's tough to see him walk over to a team and just absolutely load them up and load up the Western Conference, but the Washington Wizards play in the East. So
that's true.
You didn't give him to a team that contends with you.
It's also possible that they don't know that they have no shot at Victor Wembanyama in next year's draft. Like, sorry, it's already over. Okay. Sean, do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts, I think, would be, I actually look, the California class. We have the draft tomorrow. I get to see these two knuckleheads in person, which will be fun. We're gonna have California Classic right after that. But if you want to take a look at some summer league basketball with some former NBA, not former, but kind of fringe line NBA players, a lot of G League, a lot of overseas talent, and if you've kept up with a lot of Sac State guys, they tend to play in this tournament as well, or this league as well. I say it every year. It's the Sac Pro Developmental League. It's out in Elk Grove at a place called Rex and Margaret Fortune Education Complex. It's just basically you don't go down Elk Grove Boulevard, turn onto Bighorn, and head towards the country. So you pass through White Lock, and it's right out there. You'll see a lot of familiar faces out there. I was out there tonight. It was kind of fun seeing the likes of Lance Woods and Tony Roberts, two local comics who are touring on the national scene. And everyone a lot of people come out and check out some talent, and there's good talent to be had out there. And Christian Terrell, who was on the Kings Summer League team last year and was on Stockton Kings, is a part of it. And, we heard about Zach Chappelle, who was former Sac State as well, who tried out for the Kings, a pre-draft workout. He might be a guy you'll see at Summer League. And a lot of these guys will end up on Summer League rosters. I know Fabian White, who trains locally here as well. He'll be on the Cleveland Cavaliers Summer League roster. So a lot of talent that's out there. Marcus Graves, another Sac State product, who is on the G League team of the Bucks and has bounced around a little bit, former Stockton Kings. So if you want to scratch that basketball itch, that's where I would go. And it goes on till, it's tomorrow and Friday are the last 2 days. So wasn't able to get it out. Did get a mention last week, so I forgot about it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you normally mention it, and as soon as you started talking, I'm like, oh, you hadn't mentioned that this year.
Yeah.
Okay, so final thoughts. Number one, don't lose your head. No matter what happens tomorrow, we'll help walk you through it. Maybe we'll pull out on Friday. We'll figure something out to help get through whatever happens tomorrow with the Sacramento Kings. There's a high likelihood that nothing happens and they just sit at 24, and then you get to 38 and they sell it, and you get to 54 and it's already sold to, and everyone's sitting there like, what just happened? Just kind of like play it out. Like, this is going to be a wild, 10 days of Kings basketball. I believe so. Leading up to, the June 30th start of free agency, it's going to be pretty crazy. Get your California Classic tickets. Like Sean said, Victor Wembanyama very well could play at the Cal Classic. We do not know yet, but he's saying he's going to play in Summer League. And I know my son got tickets. We got we bought pre-sale tickets, and he went on and got 5 tickets for him and his buddies, 6 rows behind the visiting bench in case Wembanyama's there, so they can watch him even if he's not playing. So get your tickets. It's a great event. Number 2, don't swim in the river. I don't know how many times I'm going to keep saying this, but at least 2 more drown this week. Swimming in the river. Even that doesn't help you. The river's too fast. It's too cold, and there's too many tree branches and stuff have been blown down river because of all the water, and that's hiding underneath. And so even a swim vest can get you hung up on something. So don't go in the river this year. Just stay alive, people. Stay alive. Outside of that, it's going to be a good couple of weeks here. We're going to keep doing coverage. I am actually leaving Saturday morning to go on vacation, but I'm bringing my laptop with me, and we'll do a pod next week from my remote location in Mexico, somewhere in the beautiful country of Mexico.
A souvenir brought back with mine.
Yeah, maybe I'll get you a shot glass or a T-shirt, Sean.
I'll put that. No, not a T-shirt, but I'll put the shot glass to use. That's for sure.
All right, Brenden, do you need anything from Mexico?
I'll take a shot glass, I guess.
There we go. Okay, and someone says right here.
He got a new car. He already got his new car.
That's right. Someone says avoid carbon monoxide in Mexico. It's crazy. I guess that's an issue. So basically, they built their a lot of these buildings, a lot of the hotels and stuff, too airtight, and so when leaks happen, the buildings don't breathe like a normal building, like a normal house in the United States, or apartment or a hotel room. And so there have been a couple of people who have died of carbon monoxide poisoning. And so we actually have, my wife's friend was freaking out about it. So we are bringing carbon monoxide sensors with us to Mexico.
Adam Fox with the great pull of Andy in red. He's not going to Zihuatanejo. Brenden gets none of these references. It's from Shawshank Redemption.
You don't know Shawshank
Redemption? I have seen Shawshank Redemption, but I do
Oh, shit. Okay. Really?
Listen, I made a movie reference earlier in this pod. I've reached my limit. Okay.
Oh, which one? What did you say?
I said Ron Burgundy.
Oh, nice. Okay, that'll work.
Oh, he did. Okay. All right. He did. I forgot he did do Ron Burgundy reference. We have to like put like a number up on the board for Brenden.
Good job, buddy.
He's now on the
Good job. You guys proud. Yeah.
So proud.
There you go. All right. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of the Kings Beat podcast. Make sure that if you're still watching, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, jump on board with the Kings Beat, go to thekingsbeat.com, become a premium subscriber so you get all of our content here at the Kings Beat. And hold on, we're going to be like here nonstop. It's going to be a crazy next 2 weeks, and it should be a lot of fun. And so stick around, get a bunch of coverage from us here at the Kings Beat. So for Box 40, Sean Cunningham and Brenden Nunes from the Kings Pulse podcast,
and Chris Tavares,
who's sitting around waving in the background. There's Chris Tavares with his good hair. I am James Ham.
Look at those socks.
Oh, what's he got?
Oh, they're blue. Two shades of blue.
Blue with polka dots.
Polka dots. Pink polka dots.
I got trophy husband socks for Father's Day.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll wear them tomorrow for draft coverage, or maybe I won't. Maybe I'll wear shorts.
No, don't do that. We've seen that already. We don't need to see that again.
There's nothing. I mean, it's either, I have two choices: really white or really red. So that's the two choices for the legs. All right. So I am James Ham, Kings Insider for ESPN 1320 and the Kings Beat. We'll see you very soon.